Hi, beautiful people. How are ya? I hope you're having a great day. I wanted to discuss today the relationship between ADHD and fibromyalgia, according to what researchers are stating. In 2018, well, that was a big year. Researchers published several findings on this topic. So today, let's talk about what they found. Here we go. I think before I can share what I learned about the relationship between ADHD and fibromyalgia, I should explain what ADHD is. And if you're wondering if you have fibromyalgia, please watch this video on the diagnostic process. Fibro isn't dependent on whether or not you have ADHD or lupus or some other condition. It's a condition all on its own. So what is ADHD? It stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It's been described in the medical literature since 1775. The diagnosis of ADHD is well defined and valid, even in the presence of other psychiatric disorders or medical conditions. It's more common in males and occurs in 5.9% of youth and 2.5% of adults. It begins when you're a child. It's the most common neurodevelopmental disorder of childhood. It often lasts until adulthood. Up to 65% of patients with childhood ADHD continue to have difficulties in adulthood, and about 10 million adults in the US are diagnosed. That's about a 5% prevalence. People with ADHD often show impaired performance on psychological tests of brain functioning, but these tests can't be used to diagnose ADHD. Stimulus medication for ADHD has been determined safe and effective compared to non-stimulant medications. As a child, did you have trouble paying attention, controlling your impulsive behaviors, meaning you acted without thinking it through first, or what the result might be? Or were you overly active? These are signs, but it's normal for children to have trouble staying focused or doing what they're told from time to time. But children with ADHD don't outgrow these behaviors. Just because you weren't diagnosed as a kid doesn't mean you don't have ADHD as an adult. I don't think that was ever a conversation anyone talked about in the 60s or 70s when I was a child. These are the signs and symptoms: daydreaming a lot, forgetting or losing things a lot, squirming or being fidgety, talking too much, taking unnecessary risks, making careless mistakes, having a hard time resisting temptation, or have a difficult time getting along with others. I know I was a big daydreamer, for sure. I also lost things a lot and was probably a squirmer, but not really so much the rest of it. There are 3 different ways that ADHD can present itself, and this will depend on which symptoms are the strongest. ADHD may appear as extreme restlessness, and as an adult, the symptoms can become more severe with the demands of adulthood. First, there's predominantly inattentive presentation. It's hard to organize or finish a task, to pay attention to details or follow instructions or conversations. The person is easily distracted or forgets details of daily routines. If I do have ADHD, this one would fit me the most. I do find it hard to pay attention to details, but I've learned over time how important that it is in everything we do. I don't like receiving verbal instructions. I will lose the information and get frustrated. It's better if I have something to view while I'm listening. I'm more of a visual learner. I'm very easily distracted. My husband will ask me something. I'll go to look at that and then find myself distracted and doing something else. And he'll say, "Well, did you look at that?" And I say, "Oops, I got distracted." And then there's predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation. This person fidgets and talks a lot. It's hard to sit still for long, like for a meal or while doing homework. Smaller children may run, jump, or climb constantly. The individual feels restless and has trouble with impulsiveness. Someone who is impulsive may interrupt others a lot, grab things from people, or speak at inappropriate times. It's hard for the person to wait their turn or listen to directions. A person with impulsiveness may have more accidents and injuries than others. And the last one is a combined presentation. So the person will present equally as the two types. Let's talk about the cause of ADHD here briefly. First, researchers do not support the popular belief that ADHD is caused by too much sugar, watching too much TV, bad parenting, or social and environmental factors like poverty or family chaos. These things might make symptoms worse, but ADHD was present anyways. Scientists have not yet identified the specific causes of ADHD, but there is growing evidence that genetics plays a huge role. Several genes have been linked to ADHD, but no specific gene. There have been some studies who stated several non-genetic factors may be the cause, such as low birth weight, premature birth, exposure to toxins during pregnancy, and extreme stress during pregnancy, but the jury's still out. Researchers explored ADHD and fibromyalgia patients to learn about their shared clinical features, and they looked at what we call fibrofog. Also, not all people with fibro will have ADHD, but perhaps if you suffer with extreme fibromyalgia fog symptoms, then you might want to consider getting a diagnosis of ADHD as the possible connection. In studies from 2015 to 2018, researchers found in one study almost 45% of adult fibro patients had ADHD. And in another study, researchers found that almost 30% had adult ADHD. And yet another study found there was almost 25% of adults with ADHD who also had fibromyalgia. These statistics were statistically significant compared to the control groups. And in this study, the frequency of childhood ADHD was 33%, compared to 67% in the general population. It appears that ADHD may be an overlapping condition that some people with fibromyalgia may have, just as some may have anxiety and depression. It's believed that the central nervous system is involved in ADHD and fibromyalgia, and in particular, the neurotransmitters noradrenaline or norepinephrine, our stress hormone, serotonin abnormalities, which helps with attention, cognition, and emotion, and a reduced dopamine function, which is involved in pleasure. It seems important to not overlook our cognitive issues because they're often underrated or dismissed. If this is a big problem for you, getting screened for ADHD might help. Those with ADHD and fibromyalgia were more likely to have anxiety and depression. And we know that other conditions like irritable bowel syndrome and interstitial cystitis are also common in fibro. Don't overlook how all of this overlaps. It's possible that ADHD medication may help with pain and fatigue in fibro, according to a 2007 study. And there are other related conditions that overlap with fibromyalgia and ADHD. They often occur together. Autism spectrum disorder, disruptive impulse control and conduct disorders, social communication disorder, and specific learning disorders such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. But the crossover symptoms of both fibro and ADHD are cognitive dysfunction, pain, early life trauma, and emotional dysregulation. That's very interesting. Lastly, people with ADHD often describe a heightened sensitivity to pain, suggesting that pain sensitivities and ADHD may be comorbidities, with one condition influencing the other and vice versa. It's not just about how the pain feels, it's the actual sensory information that's transmitted in the spinal cord that is altered under ADHD conditions. Chronic inflammation may worsen the conditions of ADHD, and moreover, people with ADHD have a lower threshold and tolerance for pain. Wow, that's even more interesting. So I hope you learned something. I send you gentle hugs and support. Love you. Since 1770s, and as an adult, several genes have been linked to fibromyalgia. People with ADHD often described and ADHD. Lastly, people with ADHD often described